Welcome, I'm Kinetic Symphony. This is Dave. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the supernatural. Case file number 1832, written by Cape Monster 89, The Power of Knowing Without a Clue. When I was a kid, I sometimes just knew things. I remember driving home with my mom and sister, and when we turned the corner onto our street, I told my mom that her friend, Anne, was at our house. My street curved and we weren't in view of our house at the other end yet. I just knew she was there. My mom disagreed with me and said Anne wasn't coming over today. But I was just dead set on the fact that she was there. When we got closer, we could start to see our house. Sure enough, Anne's car was parked out front. She showed up unannounced. My father was not too happy about that, and decided to wait for a while until we arrived home, about 30 minutes or so. This was well before the days of cell phones in everyone's pockets, so he had no way to tell my mom before we got home. Another time, I was able to explain to my mom in detail what our classroom looked like. She taught English at a court reporting school. I had never been there. She was looking for something in the house, and I told her where it was in her classroom. I had been there in a dream, flying like Superman from a parking lot, through the school and into her classroom. I told her where the posters were, that there was a small bookcase in the hallway, where she would park, and the layout of her desk, everything. When she went to work that night, the missing item was exactly where I told her it was. I was in elementary school, and this was the early 90s, so again, no cell phones, no selfie photos from her classroom, etc. I just knew. I also used to get a really strong feeling before we had earthquakes. There was a time in middle school when we had a 3+. My school was right next to a fault line, and I was under my desk ducking and covering seconds before everyone else. The alarm at school hadn't even gone off yet. And one last random thing related to the earthquakes. I once had a weird hallucination that there was earthquake damage in my house. I woke up facing my bedroom wall and saw a huge crack running from the ceiling to the floor. I rolled over in a panic to see my dresser broken. A front leg had broken off and tipped forward, with all my stuff scattered on the ground and drawers open. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and blinked a bunch. It looked the same. I started to freak out, thinking I slept through a big-as-hell earthquake, and my family forgot about me or something. I shared a room with my sister, and she wasn't there. Or that I was just crazy. Surely I would have heard or felt something that would cause that much damage. Pulled the covers over my head and closed my eyes as tight as I could for a few seconds. When I peeked out again, everything was normal. Nothing was broken, no crack in the wall, items were where they belonged. It was incredibly weird. Plus, add in that I'm a twin, and my sister and I used to do that twin thing even though we were insanely different people. We would be in different classes and know the other was upset or angry. We would accidentally dress alike when coming from different cities to meet up, etc. Good times. Case file 1832, The Power of Knowing Without a Clue. So, you know how people say that the mind of a child is more open to the paranormal, supernatural, to the unproven, to things that just don't necessarily instantly make sense? I think that's true. The mind is not as molded to objective reality, the reality we can conclusively test and repeat in our own experiences. Now, because of that, there are things our subconscious will be more open to feeding into the conscious mind. Now, to be clear, this is not all children. Not all children can predict that someone's going to be at their home when they haven't seen anything related to it. This is literally taking data from the ether, from the jumble of the concurrent running simulation, and somehow translating that. How they even obtain that information is not clear, the subconscious. That is an ability that very few people, adult or children, have. Is it just a genetic mutation? People have kids and they just happen to have this ability? It is curious though, because if it was just random, why are so many in the scope of how precise this ability would. I mean, it wouldn't just be some random mutation. It would have to be very hyper-specific to cause this and not cause a tumor, or just some alteration in the brain that doesn't really do much for you at all, or maybe just heightens your sense of smell or something. This is something truly extraordinary. To be able to predict a future, a probable future, it's just, there are no words to describe how powerful that is. So maybe it isn't random. Maybe it is an induced mutation by the developers or observers or guardian angels, whatever you want to call them. And that's the case for so many of these stories that I've read over the years. Yeah, some are actual errors, some are truly random glitches, but so many, I think, are specifically intended, either as a corrective measure or an induced event. I fully believe there are forces above us that we can't directly detect, that are influencing us at the very least. For good or ill, I don't know. Case file number 1833, written by Crazy Black Cat Lady. When tape disappears and the cry rings clear. A couple years ago, my dad stayed the night at our house. Our spare room at the time had internet equipment in it, and when I was setting up the room, I put black electrical tape over the flashing lights, as they were quite obnoxious in the small room in the dark. A while later, when he was ready to go to bed, I walked in, and there was no tape. I freaked out, and my dad and husband thought I was losing my mind, pregnant and sleep deprived. I laid in bed questioning a lot of things that night, and then, terrified that my mind was going, fast forward to the next one. We all get up sitting in the living room. My husband goes to check something out of curiosity, and comes back, white as a ghost. There was the tape, slightly dusty from our slightly dusty floors, as if it had been there all night. My dad, who was very level-headed, couldn't even write it off, and just brushed it off like we were done talking about it. Fast forward to tonight. I have 2 toddlers, and after dinner, I am exhausted and go to lay down in our bedroom. I am in one of those sleep trances, dozing off, where you're not fully asleep, so you can hear what's going on around you. My husband came back and asked me through the door if I needed a hug. Door was locked to keep the toddlers out. I remember being slightly annoyed and finding it a little off that he woke me up to ask me that. Told him I was fine, just tired, and dozed back off. Fast forward about an hour and he's back at the door, waking me up, asking if I got his text messages, multiple of them, saying I didn't want to talk about what was wrong, that I didn't have to, but he was here to support me with lots of love emojis and gifts. Now I'm confused and he's looking terrified and freaked out, and swears that he heard me crying from the bedroom, from behind the door. He said it was very distinctly my cry, and he thought something was bothering me, that I was keeping it from him. It took me a full half an hour to convince him that I was not crying, to my knowledge. And typically, if I'm crying in my sleep, I will wake up crying. It took me 30 minutes of hardcore convincing him that I was not crying and nothing was wrong, before I think he started to believe me. Now I am definitely awake and we are both freaked out, wondering if it's this house or an entity or what he heard. All I can think is this is how every horror movie starts, and I'm slightly terrified for safety. Case file 1833, when tape disappears and the cry rings clear. So, given your reaction to this, I don't believe it was your dad that just intentionally gaslit you, removed the tape from the modem, and then just stuck it on the floor, or kept it out of sight and then put it on the floor later on to gaslight you, make you think it disappeared when it never did. I mean, it is theoretically possible, but given your reaction, he would have told you if you were crying or heard crying. And the fact that you didn't actually cry, most likely, that you were aware of, but were heard crying later on. That's disturbing. It almost does sound like some sort of spirit that was embodying the area, and that's what your husband heard. And then on another note, more positive, is your husband sounds amazing, trying to support you through something he doesn't really understand, sending you tons of support over text and all that, just checking on you. Even though it disturbed you trying to sleep, he sounds like a good guy, so good job on picking the right man for that. Very good job. Now time for the quote of the day. Nothing is permanent in this wicked world, not even our troubles. Charlie Chaplin. Things are constantly moving and switching and morphing and progressing. Either it's pain or trouble or disease. Now technically it's not entirely true. There are diseases that are permanent, chronic, and take you to the grave. But in general, if you just wait long enough, then your situation will be different, good or bad. The good news is we can directly influence where we go. We're at ocean, we have a rudder, we can kind of steer, we have a small engine, not very powerful, but enough to gently guide us towards where we want to be. It just takes a while, and you might have some rough seas between then and there. So brace yourself for the tumultuous essence of the ocean. But the fact you never really know where you're going to end up is kind of exciting, isn't it? It is for me, anyways. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.